Well, hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Welcome to the Weekender. We begin with the race for the White House. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. receiving big cheers from the MAGA crowd as he joined Donald Trump at a campaign rally in the battleground state of Arizona Friday, hours after suspending his campaign and endorsing the former president.
But he is a phenomenal person, a phenomenal man who loves the people of this country as much as anybody can love the people of this country. So, Bobby, please say a few words. Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, Kamala Harris used her nomination acceptance speech Thursday night to go after her opponent, warning voters about what she called the consequences of putting Trump back in the White House.
Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
All right, I want to bring in now CBS political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's traveling with the Trump campaign in Glendale, Arizona. They're at the event. So, Caitlin, Trump has in the past criticized RFK Jr., but he brought him out with literal pyrotechnics and huge applause from the MAGA crowd. How are they playing this endorsement now?
Yeah, Lana, it's pretty remarkable. I don't think I ever expected Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr.'s father, to get a shout out from Donald Trump at a Donald Trump rally, but that is the year we are in 2024. The big question is how this endorsement could change the state of the race. And this is how the Trump campaign sees it. They believe that in places like Arizona, where we are now, where Trump lost by just under 11,000 votes, this endorsement could make the difference here. Now, our polling, CBS News polling, shows that nationally, RFK Jr. was getting about 2% of the vote. So it's not clear, according to our polling, where his voters will go. And I can say, anecdotally, having covered this campaign, traveled across the country talking to voters, I talked to people supporting RFK Jr. who were Democrats, who were Republicans, or just kind of disaffected by politics in general. So we're waiting to see kind of how the polling shakes out. But it's clear by this campaign statement here tonight that the Trump team thinks this is something that could help them. You also have to remember that the Trump campaign has seen this race tighten significantly. This is not the race they planned for. This has changed significantly since Kamala Harris entered the race. And so this is a campaign having to essentially play a little catch-up.
And Caitlin, as you mentioned, the Democratic legacy of the Kennedy family and the surprise for anybody who had on their bingo card Donald Trump talking about Bobby Kennedy, his father, at one of these events. Something that the former president announced here was that he would create a new presidential initiative about assassination attempts and release all the information about the assassination of President Kennedy. We heard him talking about how important it was to him to hear from RFK Jr. On the eve of that attempted assassination that took place in Butler, Pennsylvania. And it seemed like that was something that was really important among the crowd there. The crowd really appreciated it. Do you know anything more about the behind-the-scenes wrangling? Because we know that other members of the Kennedy family, including RFK Jr.'s wife, Cheryl, are not pleased necessarily about this endorsement.
Yeah, they kind of talked about it a little bit on stage behind me, the idea that RFK Jr. reached out to Donald Trump after the assassination attempt that started to kind of inspire these conversations. And Trump has been asked kind of repeatedly throughout the week, excuse the noise behind me, Trump has been asked throughout the week if RFK Jr. would have a role in his administration, and he said he'd consider it. So we'll kind of see whether and how he campaigns for him across the state. But you mentioned the Kennedy family. A few months ago, many members of the Kennedy family had an event with Joe Biden endorsing him as if to show this separation between them and RFK Jr. And today, several of RFK Jr.'s siblings released a statement expressing their displeasure of their brother endorsing Donald Trump, saying that it is not in line with their fathers or their families' values.
All right. At an election in which there have been so many dramatic twists and turns, this is just the latest iteration. Glad to have you with us to help us understand the context of it better. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you. For more now, I want to bring in CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro. He's there in Chicago and has been attending all these events. So, Aaron, let's start off with the big news. How is the Harris campaign reacting to the news about RFK Jr. endorsing Trump?
Well, good to be with you. Interestingly, because the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, has been so critical of RFK, the Harris campaign took a little bit of a different tone following this news, and the statement from campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon stressed that there is open home to those who feel that they don't want former President Trump in office, and said, quote, "Even if we do not agree on every issue, Harris knows that there is more that unites us than divides us," making a plea to some of those maybe on the fence or undecided RFK Jr. fans that maybe leaned a bit more Democratic or moderate, saying you have a home with us now that he's out of the race.
All right, and the DNC just wrapped up. So what's next for the Harris campaign?
Yeah, so the Harris campaign is active. They already have an ad coming out soon in the battleground states on TV, focused on the economy. Harris making a direct-to-camera appeal, saying that she will cut middle-class taxes. And also, the ad shows images of her and Walz. While they have been on a trail together multiple times in the past couple of weeks, they have not really appeared together in the TV ad. This ad, starting today in the battleground states, will show that. Now, Harris and Walz are down in their respective residencies this weekend. We'll see what happens next week.
All right, Aaron Navarro, thank you. The U.S. Secret Service has placed several agents on leave following the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. They include the head of the Pittsburgh field office and an agent within Trump's detail. The Secret Service is continuing to investigate how a gunman armed with an AR-style rifle was able to open fire at the former president during a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. On Wednesday, Trump traveled to North Carolina, where he held his first outdoor rally since the assassination attempt. It was the first time when he was shielded by bulletproof glass at one of these rallies. You can see it there. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell issued his strongest signal yet that the central bank could start cutting interest rates soon. He gave those remarks at the Fed's annual conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming on Friday.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. We will do everything we can to support a strong labor market as we make further progress toward price stability.
Markets reacted to Powell's comments. All three indices traded higher on Friday. The Dow Jones rose more than 1%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq was up nearly 1.5%, while the S&P also closed over 1%. The Justice Department filed an antitrust lawsuit against real estate software company RealPage on Friday. Federal regulators are accusing the company of colluding with landlords to raise the rents on millions of Americans utilizing artificial intelligence software. Attorney General Merrick Garland explained how on Friday afternoon.
RealPage sells landlords what it calls, quote, revenue management software. We allege that this software is developed, marketed, and sold to enable landlords to sidestep vigorous competition in the rental market.
CBS News senior business and technology correspondent Jolene Kent joins us now from L.A. So, Jolene, give us some background. What is RealPage? How's it supposed to be utilized?
RealPage is a revenue management software for landlords and other members of the real estate community to figure out how to price rental properties. And according to the DOJ, they have used and fed confidential information into their algorithm and allowed that algorithm to offer options that illegally conduct antitrust activity violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. And so what the DOJ is saying essentially, I mean, the way that Attorney General Merrick Garland put it is the rent is too damn high, and this is contributing to it. And essentially, it is allowing landlords to justify maximizing rent hikes. And this comes as, of course, rent makes up the largest portion of inflation data that we're always here reporting on, right? And the DOJ is alleging that RealPage is acting in a monopolistic manner. Now, of course, RealPage has come out in response to this. And I want to read you their statement here. They said that their software is purposely built to be legally compliant. And they also added that landlords decide their own rent prices, always have 100% discretion to accept or reject software price recommendations there. And they have a history of working constructively with the DOJ to show that.
So, Jolene, I was looking at this complaint and trying to understand it because there's a lot of information out there about what rents are, and landlords will price their rents based off of what they see. And in this case, AI aggregates that information and uses some other confidential information, as I understand it. But I'm still trying to understand the accusation that the DOJ is making about how RealPage colluded with landlords. Can you explain how that collusion took place?
Yes. So in the complaint, the DOJ alleges that it found evidence of customers, which are landlords, of RealPage using their software, complementing RealPage for allowing classic price fixing, for example. And there's multiple examples that are cited in the lawsuit that go on to show that RealPage was helping landlords raise prices and in some cases minimize price decreases. And so these examples are what the DOJ is leaning on to make this argument. But what's really interesting here too is that the DOJ went about this investigation in a way that it hasn't traditionally. It used individuals who were data scientists to linearly interrogate the code and look at specific issues of the technology from RealPage, and in order to come to this conclusion. And if you think about it, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, he did say this morning, and he's correct in this, that Americans spend more money on housing than any other expense. Almost half of the households that are renting right now spend close to a third of their income on rent. And so as a result, this is why the DOJ says they're bringing this type of landmark action.
So it's really interesting. And so I'm wondering, Jolene, if the DOJ prevails in this lawsuit, could consumers whose landlords used this software to raise their rents have any recourse? Might they see some of that money back in their pocketbooks?
So relief is always the second step in a complaint in a lawsuit like this, especially coming from the Justice Department. First, they have to decide where the liability is and who is responsible. So I hate to say this, but it's going to be a long time of the court proceedings and all of the lead up. It could take a couple of years, as we've seen in some of these other antitrust lawsuits in the case of DOJ winning against Google recently. So it'll probably take a couple of years to decide what the outcome actually is. And then there will be a separate determination, trial, or mediation that will then lead to what is called the relief stage of this, the decision. So it depends on a lot of different things. It's going to be a long time, but certainly this is top of mind, especially when you think about how rent has gone up. According to the latest CPI data, it's up 5.1% last month compared to the year before. And inflation is sitting, just below 3%. So it still is outpacing headline inflation. A lot of people are feeling that right now.
Yeah, and a lot of times with these class action suits, it's pennies on the dollar for the victims. All right, Jolene Kent in Los Angeles, a really interesting story. Thank you.
Thank you.
A federal judge has dismissed felony charges against 2 former police officers accused of falsifying the search warrant in the deadly raid on Breonna Taylor's home. The DOJ had accused the 2 officers who were not present during the raid of putting false information into the warrant. But the judge found no direct connection between the warrant itself and the moment that police shot and killed the 26-year-old. The judge also ruled Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, is the legal cause of her death because he fired the first shot. Walker has said he thought that an intruder was entering their home. The DOJ is reviewing the decision and considering next steps. Some freight trains from Canada are on the move again, but the return to work may be short-lived. The union representing workers at CN Railway, one of the two major Canadian railways, say they will strike starting on Monday. And this comes after the Canadian government on Thursday ordered crews back to work and refereed their labor dispute, sending it over to a national arbitration board. A rail stoppage could cost Canadians hundreds of millions of dollars a day, and it could also affect the imports of some goods to the U.S., including things like wheat, fertilizer, and meat. And in Colorado, a mile-long freight train derailment is under investigation. Take a look at this. Two cars collided in the eastern part of Boulder on Thursday night. The crash injured two crew members, destroyed a rail bridge, and spilled fuel. The derailment stretches across a wide area and is expected to take a while to clean up. Well, coming up after the break, if you like eating red meat, you may have beef with a new study we're going to share with you. An expert's going to join us to explain the new dietary health research. Plus, as we wrap up a week of memorable DNC moments, we're going to take a look back at the ones that stuck out to our viewers the most. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. A second day of red lava and black smoke painted the skies over southwestern Iceland on Friday. Take a look at this spectacle. It's from a volcanic eruption in the Reykjanes Peninsula. It's the volcano's sixth eruption since awakening in December. Fortunately, officials say the impacted area is limited. It does not pose a threat to the local population. Experts say decades or even centuries of repeated eruptions threaten the peninsula, which holds 8% of Iceland's population. All right, a bit of bad news for meat lovers. A new study finds that eating certain types of meat can also increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. In the study published Friday in The Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology, researchers analyzed the data of nearly 2 million people across 20 countries. And they found that for every 1.8 ounces of processed meat eaten daily, the risk of type 2 diabetes increased by 15%. And for every 3.5 ounces of unprocessed red meat eaten daily, the risk increased by 10%. Dr. Dariush Marifazian joins us now with more from Boston. My apologies, doctor, if I brutalized your name there. You are the director of the Food is Medicine Institute at Tufts University, so you're a perfect person for us to talk to. Tell us about red and processed meat, and what is it about them that increases the risk of type 2 diabetes? Because we know that it's associated with other health problems, but this is the first time I'm hearing about type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, well, first some definitions. Unprocessed red meat is beef, pork, or lamb that will spoil if you don't cook it or freeze it within a day or two. And processed meat is preserved or cured meat like sausage, salami, bacon, or even deli meats. So we got to think about those two. And both have been associated with health harms, including diabetes. So this study really confirms what other studies have seen.
And I understand that iron plays a particular role in this link to diabetes. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, so iron we've been taught for years to fear the fat in meats, but really it seems that inflammatory compounds in meats might be particularly the problem. And heme iron, which of course is what makes red meat red, the iron is a very active oxidant compound that increases inflammation. And when you combine that with the types of fats and protein in meat and the way it's processed and cooked, you can actually get a pretty big punch of inflammation, particularly in processed meats. That inflammation can damage the pancreas, it can increase inflammation, and it can do many other things that increase risk of diabetes. And so while we need a little bit of iron, and red meat occasionally in moderation is probably okay, if you start to have it multiple times per week, you're probably getting too much, and you can start to get these pro-inflammatory effects.
So I want to drill down on that a little bit because eating it too much is something we've been warned about for a while. So with this new study, what I really want to know is if you are trying to do your best, you're eating what you're supposed to in terms of the daily helping size of meat recommended by health officials. I think it's still like the palm of your hand or the size of a deck of playing cards, right? Are you still at risk? Do you need to actually decrease the amount of meat you're eating as a result of this study if you are at risk for type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, the bottom line, I think, is that red meat neither deserves the devil's horns, that it's the most toxic thing in the food supply, nor a health halo, that it's an incredibly nourishing food. If you have a weekly serving, the risk is quite low. So about 1.5% for unprocessed meat and about 4% gram for gram for processed meat. So a regular weekly serving is probably not a lot of risk, but I think if people are starting to eat this every day, multiple times a week, then the risk will start to add up.
All right, Dr. Dayush Mozaffarian, thank you.
Thank you.
Climate activists are taking part in a very unique set of gatherings for melting glaciers, funerals. We're going to tell you exactly what a glacier funeral is and why people across the globe are engaging in them. Welcome back to the CBS News Weekender. I'm Lana Zach. Here's a look at our top stories right now. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says the time has come for the central bank to start cutting interest rates. Officials increased them 11 times over the course of a year in an effort to cool inflation. Consumer prices are at 2.9% inflation, down from a high of more than 9% in June of 2022. The Justice Department is suing a real estate software company, accusing it of working with landlords to illegally hike up rent for tenants. Prosecutors say RealPage was using an algorithm to help landlords fix prices, which violates antitrust laws. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is suspending his campaign for president and endorsing Donald Trump in the race. The politician was running for the White House as an independent, but his campaign was getting little support in the polls and was running low on funds. U.S. intelligence agencies said this week that Iran was responsible for hacking into former President Donald Trump's White House campaign. Iran denies the allegations, but in a joint statement, top intel agencies say Iran's efforts to interfere with the upcoming election goes beyond just the Trump campaign. The statement reads, quote, "The intelligence community is confident that Iranians have, through social engineering and other efforts, sought access to individuals with direct access to the presidential campaigns of both political parties." CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins us now for our weekly national security wrap-up. So, Sam, what do we know about the extent of Iran's efforts to interfere in U.S. elections?
Well, Lana, we know that Iran has been attempting to interfere in U.S. elections for years. Back in July, 100 days before the election, the intelligence community issued an assessment focused on Iran, Russia, and China, and noted that foreign actors are refining their tactics to hide their hands in their election interference efforts. Fast forward to this week, and the U.S. intelligence community issued an assessment specifically focused on Iran. It noted that Iran is attempting to interfere in our elections to stoke divisions and to undermine confidence in our institutions. It noted that Iran is using tactics like cyber intrusions and social engineering. It noted that Iran has attempted to interfere with both presidential campaigns. We understand they were successful in hacking into President Trump's campaign. They were unsuccessful in hacking into the Biden-Harris campaign. Now, interesting, Lana, when we look at the why, the assessment notes that Iran has had a long-standing effort to interfere in our elections, but that they view this presidential election as, quote, particularly consequential. That is likely based on President Trump's policies when he was in office related to Iran. As you may recall, he gave the order for the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC, reinstituted sanctions on Iran and more, and that is likely why they view this election as particularly consequential, Lana.
Sam, I'm excited for us to talk a bit about Haiti. We were discussing that a lot earlier this year. It has fallen out of the headlines recently as other things have really dominated. But this week, the U.S. Treasury Department imposed sanctions against the country's former president for his alleged role in the gang violence there. Give our viewers an update about the situation.
Well, interestingly, the government of Canada sanctioned former President Michel Martelly back in November 2022. This week, the U.S. Treasury Department issued sanctions based on former President Martelly's abusing his office to facilitate drug trafficking destined for the United States and for sponsoring gang violence. As you noted, gang violence has been a historic problem in Haiti. it really reached unprecedented levels earlier this year. A coalition of gangs took advantage of the interim prime minister being out of the country to launch a series of coordinated attacks that unleashed a wave of violence. The UN estimates that 600,000 people have been displaced. 400 Kenyan law enforcement officers arrived in country in June to try to quell the violence. A new prime minister was appointed, but the security situation is still quite dire. The new prime minister that was appointed, I should note, interestingly, served as prime minister under then President Martelli for about a year, Lana.
All right, real quick, do you have any optimism on these new ceasefire negotiations that are happening?
Well, there's a lot of optimism coming out of the United States. The administration indicated early signs were that the talks were constructive, but we do know that significant gaps still remain, particularly related to whether Israel will fully withdraw from areas in and around the Egypt-Gaza border, Lana.
All right, Sam Vinograd, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, we may soon know when that Boeing Starliner crew stuck in space will be coming home. NASA says it is set to reveal on Saturday whether the capsule has been deemed safe enough to return the astronauts from the International Space Station or if they are going to need to hitch a ride back on a SpaceX vehicle. That decision will come on the 80th day of the planned 8-day voyage. Starliner launched the 2-astronaut crew back in June. The mission has been filled with technical difficulties. Glaciers are essentially the Earth's refrigerator. They've been around for thousands of years, but this week there was a funeral for 15 glaciers that have disappeared or are in critical danger as the planet continues to heat up. July marked the 14th consecutive month of record high global temperatures, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, better known as NOAA. Areas like the Arctic region are enduring temperatures 30 to 40 degrees higher than normal, leading to scenes like this where glaciers are melting away. CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff joins us now from Atlanta to explain this glacier epidemic. And we know that, Dave, you love glaciers. You understand glacier funerals. Talk to us about what exactly is a glacier funeral.
It's really hard to think about this, Lana, because scientists from Rice University and all over the world, they're trying to bring some attention to this by putting on this glacier funeral for 6 glaciers that have completely disappeared in the world and others that will soon have a death date on their headstone. This was outside of Reykjavik. These tombstones are actually made by an Icelandic artist, and he carved them out of ice. And just like many of those glaciers on the list, those ice sculptures are now gone. They have already melted away. They will soon have a death date on them for some of those glaciers that are critically endangered. Now, this was the second time this has happened. 5 years ago, I was in Iceland for the same time when they had the first funeral for the Ökjökull Glacier, better known as the OK Glacier. They hiked up to the top of a mountain that's basically just rocks there, Lana, and they put a metal plaque there that if people hike there in the future, they will know a glacier used to be here at some point.
Talk to us about how a glacier dies.
Well, it's because of heat. And due to climate change, glaciers are melting away to just the rocks that have been hidden away under them for thousands of years. Just last year, we had the hottest year on record. Temperatures have been rising steadily since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s, when we started burning fossil fuels en masse. And that is what's causing all this heating to happen. So when the heating happens at the top of the world and at these places where the glaciers are, well, that is what melts the glaciers away. And I just want to just make one thing perfectly clear, that we're talking about land-based ice here. So it's not sea ice. So when this land-based ice goes into the ocean, that's where the sea level rise comes from. So this is not just an Icelandic story or a Norwegian story or a story about the Ganges or the Alps or anything. This is a story that will affect all of us. It's an American story.
Yeah, and Dave, you and I were talking before about glaciers and other glaciers that we had visited before we actually did this segment, because what happened in Reykjavik, it was hauntingly beautiful, these headstones for glaciers. Talk to our viewers about how widespread actually these glacier deaths are, because as you say, the impact is absolutely global.
Yeah, it's all over the world. Take a look at this live map here that they have up on the website. You can see where these glaciers are. They're not just on the poles. They are on every single continent of the Earth, except for Australia. There is one in New Zealand, but there are places like Colombia that are losing their glaciers. I was talking to scientists last night, and they were telling me that the entire continent of Africa will lose its glacial ice in the next 10 to 15 years. And glaciologists are just starting to get a handle on how many glaciers there are. There's something about 130,000 that remain all around the world, but every single one of those is in some kind of danger. And there are 8,000 glaciers that have disappeared in just China alone over the past 30 years. And Londa, to put a finer point on this, I know that you've been to glaciers on the top of the world and on the bottom of the world, but this isn't just a list, it's a set of stories that will affect us all. And I don't even know if you can explain what a glacier is until you stand on top of it.
Yeah, all right. Dave Malkoff in Atlanta. Thank you, Dave. A large Pacific storm is moving towards Hawaii and could impact the state over the weekend. For more, here's meteorologist Alex Wilson from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Well, tropical activity has been picking up across the Pacific. We've got a storm moving towards Hawaii. It is Hone. That is the leading storm in a row of systems across the Pacific Ocean. This storm likely to move to the south, but still, we're going to feel the impacts on the Hawaiian Islands, including rain later today, tonight, rain picking up on the Big Island, and throughout the weekend, the storm moves to the south, but it will increase rain across all the Hawaiian Islands. Eastern parts of the Big Island could see up to even over a foot of rainfall. And again, winds will pick up as well. Heat, meanwhile, expands across the continental U.S. We've got a lot more areas dealing with highs above 90 degrees. By Sunday, 136 million people above 90. By Monday, 161 million people with highs above 90. So our little fall break we had in some areas, that's done with for now. We're back to summer. Meanwhile, across Florida, it is soggy, it is stormy, and will stay that way into the weekend. Tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday, a stalled frontal boundary, plenty of tropical moisture in play. That'll keep things unsettled. Well, for more in-depth coverage, watch the Weather Channel on cable, now live on your favorite TV streaming device.
All right, Alex Wilson, thank you. Well, the Democratic National Convention wrapped up on Thursday, and here are some of your favorite moments from our social team.
Another round of shots. DNC, turn out for what?
All right, everyone loves this, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Turn up the what? Little John making a special surprise performance when it came time for Georgia, changing some of the lyrics to his popular song, Turn Down for What? There's also President Biden's speech on Monday. A lot of folks really became emotional watching the president becoming emotional during that lengthy standing ovation. Another top moment was just the Obamas, both the hug among these two and former First Lady Michelle Obama referring to the presidency as a, quote, black job. Also, former President Barack Obama mentioning Trump's, quote, weird obsession with crowd sizes was something that resonated with all of you viewers out there. And on Wednesday, Oprah Winfrey making a surprise appearance. She condemned Trump's comments about elections and referenced J.D. Vance's comments about childless cat ladies. That's something that has been hot on social media, to say the least. And then to wrap up the week, it was Vice President Kamala Harris accepting her party's nomination.
On behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
Harris obviously making history as the first black and Asian American woman to lead a major party's presidential ticket. Well, Turkish dramas are gaining popularity around the globe. How the country has become a leading exporter of television shows. We'll be right back.
seems a bit eccentric, but you're in good hands.
All I care about is justice for a life taken too soon.
Turkish TV dramas known as Dizi are gaining popularity around the globe, drawing millions of viewers and boosting tourism. The Economist reports that Turkey is now the world's third biggest exporter of scripted television series, only behind the U.S. and the U.K. According to LA-based research company Parrot Analytics, international demand for Turkish dramas has increased by 184% between 2020 and 2023. The Istanbul Chamber of Commerce tells us that the export of television series earned Turkey $600 million in 2022. The agency also says that number has likely grown since then. And the fourth season of Resurrection Ertuğrul gained over 14 million viewing hours globally in the first 3 months of last year on Netflix. For more, Ravel Moedin joins me now. She is a senior researcher at TRT World Research Center, which is a research and policy institute based in Istanbul. So thank you for joining us. For the uninitiated, and I am among the uninitiated, talk to us about what a Dizi is. What's driving this popularity?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So let me start with a personal story. I grew up in Pakistan, and we always had Hollywood around us, and suddenly, all of a sudden, Turkish content started popping up everywhere. They were all on our screen. People started naming their child Ertuğrul. And that piqued my interest as an academic researcher. So we conducted a lot of qualitative and quantitative studies to kind of study what's going on, what's the phenomenon, like why are people so crazy about these shows. And, you've already mentioned, we already know there's the third largest, exporter of content worldwide now. There's clearly a very large, wide appeal for it. But our research helped us learn some very important things, some really interesting things. 3 main things that I'm going to point out right now. One, even though it was not really ever a planned approach, there was not really ever an actual policy for moving forward, from the government or something. But there has been an increase due to these shows in Turkish soft power. And not only is there an impact on people intending to visit Turkey, which they clearly are, but there is also an increase in intent to support Turkish foreign policy. There is an interest in. So, from the government's perspective,
this is a valuable investment. Talk to us a little bit more about how the interest in Turkish dramas is actually boosting tourism.
So the interest in Turkish dramas is basically people are actually intending to move to Turkey because of these Turkish dramas. Our research is clearly showing that.
Really, moving to Turkey.
Moving to Turkey, and action is actually being translated into, intent is translated into action now. In our studies, we are seeing that. People actually are investing in Turkey. They're learning Turkish. They're supporting, they're following Turkish news. So this is very, it's crazy to think that a Turkish drama is actually creating this much interest in a country. And, one thing which I find very interesting is that there's everybody is saying that, whatever the people that we've spoken to, that there's a lot of relatability of the content. There's universal themes, of course, there's love, family, honor, and all of that. But there's also this extra zing in them, which is this. They always put these content, these nuggets of cultural or historical pieces, in the disease, and what that does is not only do a lot of people around the world relate to it, they see themselves represented in them, but they also see that it's something exotic. It's something which is interesting. Just wanted to let you know that Istanbul literally was the most visited city literally last year, in the entire world. It contributed to 12% of the country's GDP, tourism.
And really quickly, tell me, who are the people who are coming the most? What are the groups of people who are coming the most?
So you'd be interested to know that it's from all over the world. It's, I mean, obviously regional tourists are very, I mean, both from the region, like the MENA region, there's obviously coming, but there's also from like Latin America, there's from Europe, South Asia, East Asia, so all over the world. They're all coming to Turkey to kind of visit and find out more about where their favorite characters come from.
Truly
what's
global.
Going to happen.
Thank you so much.
Exactly.
Rebel Moyden, appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Well, the U.S. Open begins on Monday. We're going to talk about some of the heavy hitters. We'll be right back. Well, the last Grand Slam of the year is upon us. The U.S. Open kicks off here in New York City next week with first-round action starting Monday. Serbia's Novak Djokovic and American Coco Gauff will be looking to defend their titles. And Matthew Futterman joins me now for more. He's a senior writer for The Athletic. So, Matthew, let's start on the men's side. You think Djokovic is going to be able to defend his title?
I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to give it a good shot, but you know, he won the Olympic gold medal a few weeks ago in Paris, and that was sort of the last remaining thing that he hadn't won in his entire career, which is kind of an amazing thing to think about. That in
given
his whole
all all the other titles that he holds, right?
Right, and you know, so you just sort of wonder, like, does he feel like, okay, now I'm done? And like, where's the motivation going to come from? Now, he's a guy who's really, really good at finding motivation, so I'm sure he'll be able to. But it's a sort of a different moment with him coming back to defend this title.
Well, let's talk about the controversy around world #1 player Jannik Sinner, whose doping case came to light this week. Could all that noise affect his game?
I think it absolutely has been affecting his game, and you know, will continue to affect his game. You know, he said just before we were speaking with him, and, you know, he said it's really been a struggle. It's been on his mind. It might actually have a positive effect on his game in the sense that it's been a secret that he's been carrying around since March as the litigation process has been going on. Now it's out. He said that's a big relief. So maybe it loosens him up. He won a title the other day in Cincinnati knowing that this news was going to come out this week. And so maybe it's already helping.
Well, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the women's side, because the defending champ, Coco Gauff, hasn't exactly had a great summer, but she does have a lot of fans cheering for her. What do we expect to see on the women's side of the draw?
You know, we expect to see something that's pretty wide open and unpredictable. That's what's basically the storyline in women's tennis, except when you're at the French Open where Iga Swiatek wins all the time. But, you know, this should be a pretty wide open tournament. I'd say there might be 15 or 20 women who can win it. You just never know. Coco, I would absolutely say, is one of those people who absolutely can win it. She loves it here. She's won it here before. She'll have to play better than she's been playing the last couple of months. She knows that better than anybody, but she's certainly up for the challenge.
All right. Matthew Futterman, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that does it for us. Up next, highlights of the Daily Report. I'm Lana Zek, and you are streaming CBS News 24/7.